Formula One's governing body, the FIA, has been embroiled in controversy throughout 2024, but over the past month, it has become far worse. Mass firings, reports of corruption, and a shocking rebuttal from the FIA president have brought disrepute to the organization. There is genuine concern over how Formula One will be governed in the coming years, with the much maligned president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, appearing to set up a situation within the FIA where he cannot be fired. Today, I'll check out the rule change he's introducing, which would put him above the law of his own organization, making him effectively untouchable, and why there's nothing Formula One can do about it. So, don't go anywhere. The FIA's management of Formula One has been under scrutiny all year. The drivers have been outspoken about the inconsistency of the race directors and the race stewards, and at times discussions over the decisions made by race control have dominated the sport's coverage, detracting from what has been happening on track. I've seen your comments and calls for Formula One to ditch the FIA, and I'll talk about the difficulties of doing that later in the video. But let's start with the FIA president's latest move toward removing democracy from the organization. Yesterday, the FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem, called MBS from here on, shared a set of revisions to the statutes governing the audit and ethics committees within the FIA. The revisions were sent to member clubs to be approved at a vote of the FIA General Assembly on the 13th of December. Currently, the audit and ethics committees of the FIA work separately from the FIA president, allowing them the freedom to raise issues against MBS if needed. The revisions would remove that freedom though, requiring the audit and ethics committees to report directly to the FIA president and the president of the FIA Senate rather than to the wider Senate. The revisions would also remove the power of the audit committee to investigate financial issues independently. The issues with this change should be obvious, but I'll talk more about them in a second. First, let's add some background as to why MBS is attempting to remove the autonomy of the audit and ethics committees. Beginning with the audit committee, their role within the FIA is to act as an independent body who ensures that the FIA's finances are being managed in a way that matches with the organization's own rules. Last week, we reported that the FIA had ended the service of two members of the committee that scrutinizes its finances after they expressed concerns about a $1.5 million fund set up at the suggestion of MBS. At a meeting of the four-person audit committee for the FIA, questions were raised over whether it would be appropriate for Ben Sulayem to suggest offering $1.5 million to international motoring clubs who will vote when the president seeks re-election in 2025. The money for the $1.5 million fund was to come from the FIA president's personal expenses allowance from the FIA. In February, the auditing committee received information from the finance department that asked questions about the administration of funds allocated for the president's expenses and the absence of receipts. The lack of receipts was an issue and was against French law, where the FIA are based. When MBS was asked for receipts to abide by French law, the president decided to stop using his $1.5 million expenses allowance and instead wanted to set up a fund called the President's Development Fund, which would be paid for with the allowance money. The lack of receipts raised serious questions about the use of his allowance prior to the decision, and the creation of the fund worried the auditing committee, who saw it as an attempt to buy votes in next year's presidential election. The sacking of half of the committee and the revision of the statutes, which will remove the committee's freedoms of investigation, is a direct response by MBS to the investigation against him. The revisions of the statutes regarding the ethics committee is also a direct response by MBS to an ethics committee investigation against him. The FIA's compliance officer, Paolo Bizzarri, was fired last month. As the FIA's compliance officer, Bizzarri ensured that the FIA's code of ethics was followed by all members of staff. While in that role, he reported MBS to the Ethics Committee for directly interfering in the outcome of a Formula One Grand Prix and for attempting to cancel another. MBS allegedly intervened to overturn a penalty given to Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso at the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. He reportedly called the FIA's Vice President for Sport for the Middle East and North Africa region, who was in Saudi Arabia for the race in an official capacity, and made it clear he thought Alonso's 10-second penalty for work being done on his car while serving a 5-second penalty should be revoked. That 10-second penalty was revoked post-race. The second race he was said to have intervened in was the Las Vegas Grand Prix. He allegedly told officials not to certify the circuit for use, and those officials were told, on behest of the FIA president, to find a way not to pass the circuit for safe racing. MBS has been in a constant battle with the people who control the financial side of Formula One, Liberty Media, since he took over the governing body, and stopping the Las Vegas Grand Prix from going ahead would have been a big blow to Liberty Media. MBS was cleared by the Ethics Committee on both charges. Bazzari was meant to be safe from the FIA president. His position was only able to be terminated by a vote in the FIA Senate, but that vote never took place when he was fired from the organization. So what we have here is two committees within the FIA that are meant to ensure that the organization is run in an ethical and transparent manner to the laws and statutes of the organization, being gutted by MBS for doing their job and now losing their freedom to investigate MBS. The result will be that the FIA president is above the rules of the organization he runs, giving him the freedom to do as he pleases. While the FIA will remain as a democratic organization with an election for the president next year, though currently no one is running against MBS, MBS will be free to use the organization's money to buy votes as he pleases via the President's Development Fund. He'll also be untouchable by any within the organization who try to stop him due to his complete control over the Audit and Ethics Committee. So the FIA will remain a democracy, but only in name. It will, by all intents and purposes, be a dictatorship. If you're familiar with the 2015 FIFA corruption scandal and how that organization is run, then a lot of this will be very familiar to you. Before I address your calls for Formula One to leave the FIA, the difficulties around it, and why you may not hear as much about this story as you should, if you want to support us in bringing you F1 news on a daily basis, please give this video a like and subscribe to F1 Reverse. Thanks a lot. So every time the FIA is the subject of one of our videos, there are always people within the comments saying that Formula One should just ditch the FIA. That isn't as easy as Formula One just saying they'll make up their own rules from now on and then go their separate ways. The FIA are a huge organization who cover far more than just Formula One, but importantly, they own the Formula One brand. F1's commercial partner, Liberty Media, leases the rights to the Formula One brand from the FIA. So the first issue with splitting from the FIA is that Formula One would no longer be allowed to be called Formula One, a huge commercial loss to the series. So if Formula One were to make the split, then the teams, along with Liberty Media as a financial backer, would have to all be in agreement on the decision and would have to create a new brand. Now the FIA aren't just going to let Formula One die either, it's the jewel in their crown. So the new series created by the current teams and Liberty Media would be in direct competition with the FIA's Formula One series. Assuming that the teams and Liberty Media accept that and decide to do it anyway, they then have to tackle the huge problem of running the races. The FIA writes the sports rulebook, they train and manage the stewards and race directors who impose it, and they pay the local motorsports clubs who supply track marshals to the circuits. They inspect the tracks to ensure that they're safe to host races and safe to allow spectators. Without the certification that the FIA gives out after the inspections, the circuits would likely find it impossible to get proper insurance to host races. On top of that, the FIA would be able to pressure any track that did agree to host a race for the new series into not doing so. The FIA controls the vast majority of international motorsport, so for example, if Silverstone agreed to host a race for the new series, then the FIA could say, "You go for it, but we won't allow you to host any other FIA-sanctioned event ever again," financially crippling the circuit. That is just the tip of the iceberg as well. There is also a huge amount of investment into Formula One teams from the Arabian Peninsula, specifically Saudi Arabia, where MBS is from and holds a large amount of influence. Legal issues with breaking from the FIA would be a problem as well, and the financial nightmare that would be setting up and marketing a new series, and probably a million other things that we as fans of the sport can't even begin to consider. So is it possible? Absolutely, of course it is. But realistically, the issues with starting a new series are insurmountable. And finally, why is the growing corruption within the FIA and MBS's autocratic leadership of the FIA not being more widely spoken of and criticized? It's because the FIA gets to decide who from the media is allowed on track. They manage which outlets have media passes and who don't. If one of the big motorsport organizations like Autosport or The Race, who make the majority of their money out of Formula One reporting, start to shout too loudly about this, then the FIA can just revoke their media rights, excluding them from the paddock, from the pit lane, from press conferences, and from media circles. If Sky Sports become too critical, the FIA can revoke their rights to film at the circuit and interview in the paddock. The FIA controls the sports media. How do you feel about MBS seizing control of the FIA? Are you worried about what it means for the future of Formula One? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.